So we are going to practice a reference photo drawing together. We just have this paint blob. I think maybe it's lipstick or something. I don't know. It just makes for like good color mixing practice. I gave you a color version of it, obviously, because we're using colored pencils. I also gave you a value version of it because I know that sometimes our brains have a hard time translating color into value. So both are just helpful for us to have as we are drawing. So, your toned paper that you have is best for colored pencil drawings. The color mixtures look a little bit better. It kind of has like a base or a primer underneath it. I don't know if you guys have taken painting and you do like the under painting before you do the actual painting on top. It's kind of the same thing. So, our first step when drawing from a reference photo with colored pencils is we are going to kind of figure out what color mixtures we have. So we're going to make one base color, one tint, one shade, one tone for these pinks that we see here. So I'm just going to use one side of this for my color mixing and then the other side for the actual drawing itself. So this is pink, obviously. It's kind of more of like a orangey pink, so I'm going to pull out my red and my orange, which again, I don't know why my orange is so short, but I'm just rolling with it. Orange, white, black, and my true blue. So first I am going to, and this is a little bit more hard than our Van Gogh worksheet because I have not pulled out the swatches for you with a color selector tool, so we kind of have to fake it ourselves. We're going to try and make just like this kind of regular, I can circle it on here, regular red-orange hue that we have kind of right about here. I don't know if you can see that with my finger. So, I'm going to put down a layer of my red. Add a touch of orange into it. And then I'm going to burnish half of that and kind of look to see if it matches the way that I want to. I have a feeling that it might need, that's too red. I think that's too red. I think it needs a little bit more orange in it. And then I'm going to burnish that and see what it looks like. I think that's closer. Depending on how heavy-handed you are or light-handed, your mixtures might be slightly different from my mixtures, but my recipe for that was red, double orange, red on top. So that's my base hue. Again, like I said yesterday, very rarely will you ever be drawing something and just using one colored pencil for it. Very rarely. Okay, so let's do a tint next. So I'm going to use that same kind of base color with my red, double orange, and then since this is a tint, I'm just going to burnish with white on top. So that was red, double orange, white on top. Ooh, that's the best looking color so far. I like that. Obviously, I can make lots of different tints besides just this one, depending on how heavy or light my base hue is. But this would be a good tint for like this area right here with that highlight. Alright, hue, tint, let's do a shade. So we have some shadows here on this paint blob and over here. So again, with my base hue, I'm going to do some red, double orange, and just a light layer of black. See what it looks like. Again, there's a lot of kind of experimentation and problem solving with colored pencils and color mixing in general. And you kind of don't really know what it's going to look like until you do that final burnish layer. So red on top. And I'm going to do half of it and look at it again, just like I've been practicing. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good for a shade. Hue, tint, shade. Our last one is a tone. Okay, so nothing new here. Red, double orange, a little bit of my true blue. Burnish on top. We have some nice tones kind of through here and like down here. Lots of tones and tints on this. Red, double orange, be careful with that true blue again. Oops, I forgot to write my recipe. Burnish with red on top. Should look different than your shade. It's going to be darker, but it should look different than your shade. Okay, so now that we know how we're going to make all of the colors from this photo, we are going to sketch in our shape of our paint blob. So, grab yourself a pencil. And it's a paint blob, so it's okay if it's not super perfect. I did not want us to have to worry about drawing something really challenging for this. Mine is way too big. Make sure it's about the same size as the reference photo.
Red. Yeah. Okay.
So we're going for just kind of major edges and lines that we see. Keeping our lines nice and sketchy. Colored pencils hate ghost lines, just like every type of pencil. mine's bigger. Oh well. Alrighty, so we sketch in our object, and then what we need to do before we move on is lighten and thin out our lines. Colored pencil does not like to have regular pencil underneath it. It gets trapped and you just can't erase it. Colored pencil in general really doesn't erase that well to begin with. Like barely at all. So thin out those lines, make them light, like you can barely see them. They're just there as a guide. Alright, and we are going to work on, I think that maybe we'll just do this part of it. We'll see how long this takes us. So this kind of bottom curve, oops, sorry, you couldn't see any of that. Bottom curve of the paint. So I'm going to start with this furthest out edge all the way to the white highlight. So looking at that, I see a shade on the very edge, and then it kind of fades up to that white highlight, and then I get like my base hue and a little bit of a tint. So, thinking about my recipes that I have, I'm going to start with my base value, or my base color of my red, just kind of outlining that edge. And I'm going to fill it in to right about where I see that highlight. If I need to, I can draw in that highlight edge for myself with a pencil. So that's the area that I am going to shade first. Putting down my red. And then it has double orange in it. So now that I have that blocked in, I'm going to start my mixing. Double orange. And if we look at the values, we have two different values. We have the shade on the very edge, and then our hue in between the shade and the highlight. So I'm going to then block in my shadow with the black. So filling just that shade area. And maybe just a touch of black, kind of like right there on the reference photo. It's slightly darker than the place next to it, but just a little bit. And then like always, we burnish with that top layer. And I'm burnishing over my shadow first. And then into that area that's just my regular hue. Alright, and then I'm going to do this tint area down here. So I just did this shade here. I'm going to work on this tint area here. So looking at it, I have a highlight edge. I have kind of a half and half really light tint next to a not so light tint. So first I'm going to block that in with my red. So it's kind of like an oval shape. And then I'm going to put down my base value inside. Double orange. And now half of this is lighter than the other half, down that kind of diagonal edge that we see. So I still need to burnish with white, but I think I'm going to take my red and do an extra red layer on that slightly darker red half. So basically what I've drawn is like an oval like this. I filled in the whole thing red and double orange, and then I did an extra red on top like that. Kind of like a yin-yang, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to burnish with white over the darker half. And then over the lighter half. And then get my pencil really sharp because there's still that kind of line highlight that runs right along that edge. I'm going to see if I can do it with my colored pencil. If I need to use a gel pen, I can also do that. It's looking like I might need a gel pen. Yup, sure do. I'll have to do that later. Alright, I'm going to give you guys the next 15 minutes to continue working on this. Take it just one little space at a time. If I were you, maybe an easy place to go from here is, if you don't like the little highlight areas, kind of right above where we just did, maybe you do this kind of like curve of the blob, or maybe you just do the inside part, which is pretty flat. It goes from kind of like a tint into like just a darker tint, or you could do this shadowy section there. Those are the three sections that I would maybe concentrate on. So pick somewhere, jump right in.